Discover the inspiring moment that made me late for a meeting with my wealthy son-in-law's family. Jessie's heart raced as she slipped through the front door, glancing down the pristine suburban street bathed in golden sunlight. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a reminder that she had mere minutes before she met her son-in-law's influential family for the first time. What would they think of her? A nurse, a single mother in her 40s, standing against a backdrop of perfectly manicured lawns and sprawling mansions. Would her scrub stain the lavish dining table set for their extravagant dinner? She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass door, a woman in a faded dress clutching a dish that felt far too modest for the occasion. Unease washed over her like cold water. Suddenly, an agonized gasp broke through her thoughts. Jessie turned to see her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, struggling to rise from the ground just outside her own door. A flash of instinct overrode her anxiety. Jessie, the nurse trained to prioritize lives above all else, raced to Mrs. Thompson's side, hoping her compassion outweighed any judgment waiting across town. "Mrs. Thompson!" Jessie exclaimed, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" The old woman grimaced, her frailty evident beneath the layers of clothing, yet her eyes sparkled with the warmth of 1,000 memories. "Fell trying to get my mail, dear. Should ve waited for someone younger. How's your daughter?" Jessie hesitated, the clock still ticking in her mind. "She's fine, just a bit nervous about the dinner tonight." But the words felt insincere against the weight of Mrs. Thompson's frail presence. The fleeting worries of wealth and status slipped away as she wrapped her arms around Mrs. Thompson instead, assessing the damage with tender care. "Never let worry drag you down, Jessie. My husband had a heart of gold, and we lived in a small apartment. We had each other, and that was enough," Mrs. Thompson said with a wistful smile, her voice threading through Jessie's chaotic thoughts. She shared glimpses of her past, echoing a life filled with love, laughter, and the richness of human connection, a treasure far more valuable than tangible wealth. Jessie's heart sparked with warmth against the chilly dread of inadequacy that crowded her mind. As she helped Mrs. Thompson to her feet, Jessie felt clarity begin to swell. The core teachings from her mother surfaced. Kindness didn't come from a bank account, it was inside every one of us. But as she glanced at her watch, panic returned. She was late, truly late now, absolutely fashionably late. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Stepping into the opulent dining room, Jessie felt the cold air of wealth wash over her. The family's voices boomed with laughter, bursting with stories of success and high society, an aura that instantly made her feel like an outsider. Gilded frames surrounded them, their luxuries astounded Jessie. She stood in the doorway unpolished, vulnerable. But somewhere deep within her, Mrs. Thompson's wisdom sparked a fire of defiance. In that lavish moment, she felt the need to tell her truth. "Actually," Jessie interjected, her voice breaking through the superficial merriment, "I believe true success is measured in compassion, in the grit to care for others. That's what I live for." Silence cloaked the room, echoes of surprise settling. Insistent glances turned towards her, and barriers began to crumble, but then, the inevitable question surfaced. "Your background? Where do you fit into all of this?" The familiar sting pricked Jessie's heart. Was she about to expose herself to harsh judgment? Could she brave the unfamiliar world that surrounded her? An air of tension draped over the table, making the richness of their surroundings almost suffocating. Jessie's heart raced. They were all seeking connection in their own ways, but would her truth be enough to bridge the chasm, or would the weight of their prejudices consume the moment? As she stood there, poised between hope and the dread of rejection, she sensed the thunderous storm of misunderstandings about to collide. The atmosphere thickened, a palpable silence enveloping the room as Jessie grappled with the weight of the question posed. A myriad of emotions surged through her: defiance, vulnerability, and a strong desire to connect. She had spent years in the shadows of others' expectations, and now, she faced the moment that could either shatter her or elevate her. "Where do I fit?" she echoed, steadiness seeping into her voice like the rising tide. "I fit in the heart of a community that doesn't judge a person by their possessions but by their capacity to care." She felt that fire of defiance grow, illuminating her purpose in nursing, in motherhood, and in life itself. Around the table, expressions flickered from incredulity to curiosity. Jessie forged ahead. "My career is more than just a job, it's part of who I am. It defines my values and shapes my relationships. Nursing taught me the strength in vulnerability and the importance of resilience." As she spoke, she could see the shift in their demeanor. Their cautious glances exchanged with one another began to soften, if only slightly. Perhaps they were starting to listen, to peel back the layers of judgment and discover the person behind her modest dress. "While your world is filled with luxury, mine is brimming with the urgency of life and death decisions," she continued, each word a catalyst for her growing confidence. "Every day, I witness raw courage and profound heartache. I don't envy your wealth, I admire your family's success. But we all measure success differently." The matriarch of the family, an astute woman with piercing blue eyes, now scrutinized Jessie with an intensity that both intimidated and emboldened her. "You mean to tell me that despite not having the same resources, you find richness in your life?" Her tone was sharp, but Jessie detected an undercurrent of genuine interest. "Yes, exactly that. I've experienced love, loss, joy, and hardship, things that money can't buy. I have seen people at their most vulnerable, and I've learned that true wealth is found in compassion, not just currency." With this assertion, Jessie not only asserted her worth but rooted herself firmly into the moment. Yet, even in this growing acceptance, shadows of doubt still loomed within her. What if her honesty ultimately alienated them further? How much of her truth would they actually accept? As Jessie scanned their expressions, acknowledging the diverse reactions, a mix of intrigue and discomfort, she felt her resolve being challenged once more. Then, a voice broke through the undercurrent of silence. It was her son-in-law, Mark. "Mom, you've always been a fighter. Your strength is inspiring." He flashed a reassuring smile, one that made Jessie's heart swell, yet confusion stirred within her. What more did they need to discuss? Was there a stepping stone toward their acceptance just beyond this emotional chasm she had just traversed? "Let's talk about family," he suggested, redirecting the conversation. "After all, that's the connection we all share, regardless of our lives." Jessie shifted in her seat, torn between relief and apprehension. Yes, family was the bond they shared, but could her truth truly spark a real connection among them? The flicker of hope urged her onward, yet questions hung thick. As she felt their attention shift from incredulity to the possibility of acceptance, she pondered the balance between her past and the uncertain future ahead. How far could she push against her insecurities without fracturing the fragile bonds that were forming? And then, in a moment that felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying, Jessie took a deep breath as she prepared to unveil the most profound truth of all, that while these people might offer her a wider world, it was her willingness to be authentic that would ultimately define her place among them. Would they choose to stand beside her, or would they retreat back into their gilded bubbles? The answer lingered just out of reach, and yet Jessie could almost feel the turning tide, both within herself and in the room. It was a moment of truth in the making, one that drew her closer to the very essence of who she was, an unyielding spirit forged in the fires of her life thus far. As she began to articulate her next thoughts, a sudden realization gripped her, a fierce awakening of purpose. Would they truly accept her for who she was, or would her newfound empowerment create an even greater divide? The moment to push forward was now, and she was ready to step into the unknown. But as Jessie readied herself for the next wave of honesty, a singular thought echoed in her mind, compelling her to dive deeper. What lay beneath the surface of their wealth? The room held its breath as Jessie lingered on her next words. She sensed the weight of anticipation grounding her, threading through the uncertainty and unearthing a newfound resilience. No longer merely a nurse, a mother, or a person observing life from the sidelines, she was stepping deeper into the arena of her own truth, one layered with complexities. "Family," she echoed, her gaze sweeping over each face in the room, "is what anchors us. Every single one of us has a story to tell about our families, don't we? She felt the air shift again as recognition rippled among them, and her conviction grew. If she could unveil her story, perhaps they would open up theirs, too. She began tentatively, recounting tales of her own upbringing, not tales of luxury but of raw, authentic experiences that had shaped her. The cramped living rooms, warm with laughter despite financial struggles, the fierce determination in her mother's eyes when confronting adversity, how the pain of loss had carved deeper reservoirs of empathy within her. Every detail painted a picture, a world where values outshone material wealth. Mark listened intently, nodding along, his expression a mixture of pride and thoughtful reflection. Yet she sensed the skepticism lingering in the older generation at the table, particularly from the matriarch who raised an eyebrow, challenged by the contradictions. And yet, she pressed on, the tide of her emotions surging. What you see today isn't just a narrative of hardship. It is also a testament to love, perseverance, and the strength of community. My history is laden with lessons that wealth can never afford, lessons crafted in moments of vulnerability, the very essence of what bonds us, regardless of our station in life. The tension in the air shifted again, slowly transforming into something akin to curiosity. Her words began to resonate, echoing in a manner that hinted at uncharted depths waiting to be uncovered. Curiosity had begun to unfurl its wings, and with it, Jessie experienced a newfound freedom. She could feel a potential bridge forming across the chasm she'd once thought insurmountable, but as the conversation evolved, so did Jessie's internal dialogue. Was she truly ready to expose the darkest moments of her past? How much grit would she need to reflect on her pain without seeming weak? This was not just about acceptance, it was about reclaiming fragments of herself often pushed to the background. The matriarch broke through Jessie's reverie with a question that knocked the wind out of her. And what does that mean for your children? Do you insist they walk the same path? The question sliced through Jessie like a sharp knife, and she faltered, the once confident flow of words ebbing. Instinctively, she felt a wave of defensiveness rise within her. Her desire for their approval began to clash with her commitment to honesty. I want them to define their success, not through material achievements but through the impact they have on others, she replied, her voice steadier now, forged in the momentary tempest within. We can all end up wealthy in many ways. The matriarch seemed to absorb this, her expression softening as if riddled thoughts began to coalesce. And yet, Jessie felt the uncertainty creeping in again, an echo of doubt. How would they interpret her struggle? Would they align her failures with their perception of success or understand the intricate tapestry that wove her world? It struck her then, this was not merely about acceptance, this was her own assertion of identity, a chance to rewrite her narrative into one of empowerment instead of victimhood. She felt a sense of urgency to forge connections that were as raw and honest as the truths she shared. The conversation drew her forward, navigating a fragile and potent territory filled with potential revelations. The gathering struck her as both a challenge and an opportunity, the edges of her reality a flickering reminder of the paths she treaded. Jessie, Mark interjected softly, breaking her focus. The weight behind his voice suggested he has seen more than she realizes. What do you wish for us to understand? His question reverberated, one deep enough to transcend wealth, emotions, and preconceptions, beckoning her to share something she had never articulated. Jessie's heart raced as she clung to the fading lines of doubt, feeling the unknown extend before her, a tunnel leading toward an authentic connection amidst the fear of rejection. It was as if a door opened inside her mind, inviting her to step through the threshold of vulnerability and claim her place, yet she hesitated. What if the truth she chose to reveal bore weight far beyond her expectations? What lay deeper within her own narrative, the truth they'd yet to recognize? The moment loomed large, intensified by possibilities, ready to explode into an awakening that could either bind them together or sever the ties before they even began. Jessie inhaled slowly, eyes brightening with determination. This was her moment, and she felt poised at the edge, ready to bridge the distance one step deeper. Would they embrace the authenticity she offered, or would they recoil from the shadows she dared to confront? As she poised to answer Mark, the weight of their collective silence bordered on expectation, and she was ready to dive deeper. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself for the leap into honesty. Each person at the table leaned in, the charged atmosphere thick with anticipation that propelled Jessie forward. The reality of her truth felt like an untamed beast, one that had often been locked away in shadowed corners, only to be released now for the sake of connection. My past, she began, her voice a calm ripple in the hushed room, is not just a story of resilience but also a continuous battle against the aspects of myself that I've tried to bury. The words were unsteady but ignited a response that shocked her. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as she began to focus on the duality of her experiences, the warmth of love intertwined with the chill of rejection, the light of community amidst the dark of isolation. The matriarch's gaze shifted, now a scrutinizing lens, as if she were calibrating Jessie against her own expectations. Jessie pressed on, determined to illuminate the shadows. There were times I thought success was solely financial. I chased that vision while risking the true wealth, my relationships and understanding of self. I know now that I lost sight of who I was. A flicker of recognition crossed Mark's face, and the tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced by a contemplative silence. Jessie realized she wasn't merely speaking to them, she was deliberating her own sense of value, drawing boundaries around her past and setting the stage for her own future vision. The hardest lesson to learn was how to redefine failure, she continued, feeling a surge of empowerment. Every setback was an invitation to reevaluate my understanding of success. For so long, I thought I was a nurse by profession, a mother by vocation, yet I was learning to be a person first, imperfect, learning and evolving. The matriarch's expression softened as if layers of preconceptions were being peeled away. Maybe, just maybe, through her story, Jessie was revealing parts of herself that the older generations, too, might resonate with, a glimpse into their vulnerabilities wrapped in the fabric of experience. "And what of you today?" Mark asked, his voice inviting yet probing. "In this moment, what do you truly seek from us?" That simple question shone a light on the trajectory of her development, pressing against the walls she had built around her heart. "I seek understanding," Jessie said, her voice steadying as the weight of her vulnerability took on a form of its own. "I wish for you all to see that our stories, even when painful, coalesce into a quilt of shared human experience. I want you to understand that it's okay to be both strong and flawed." Jessie's resolve crystallized. Maybe there was strength in the dialogue, not just for her but for those who listened. She felt a crack in the armor of societal expectations. They were not simply a wealthy family, they were individuals, each carrying their own burdens, their own scripts to rewrite. "I tell you this not to gain your sympathy, but to invite you into the conversation about our pasts, those unspoken events that shape who we are and who we want to become." She paused, letting the gravity of her words mingle with the air. "I want my children to grow up knowing that every personal struggle can lead to growth. I want to let them view life through a narrow lens of accomplishment." Now the matriarch looked at her with something akin to respect, an acknowledgement of the simple yet profound strength it took to unveil her soul. Perhaps Jessie was not just exposing her narrative but unlocking a door for them too, yet even as dialogue flowed, a part of Jessie remained vigilant, instinctively aware that the sentimentality and vulnerability often bore heavy consequences. She wondered what deeper truths might emerge from this exchange, what else would surge to the surface uninvited. "Jessie," Mark said, now with a quiet urgency, "how do you plan to integrate this newfound understanding into your family interactions? How do you apply your experiences practically?" His question ignited a whirling in her mind, new pathways of thought spiraling outward. What did it mean to truly integrate all she had learned from both the struggles and the triumphs? Her heart raced at the possibility of bringing more transparency into her family life, of navigating conversations free of judgment. As Jessie stared at the faces surrounding her, the contours of their expectations still vaguely etched in the air, a new resolve settled deep in her core. It was clear that diving deeper now required careful strategy and deliberate action beyond mere words spoken today. "By setting an example," she answered firmly, her voice gaining subtle strength. "And by being more vocal about my journey. I want them to carry the lessons forward in their lives, to engage in dialogues about both success and failure without fear." Her proclamation felt like a declaration, a turning point. It was not just a desire to be understood, it was a call to arms to stake her claim on the futures of her children, to push against any boundaries that might wish to confine their understanding of wealth. But deep down, Jessie sensed an underlying tension. Could her newfound approach withstand the pressures of a society that still emphasized financial achievement over emotional resonance? Would she face resistance not just from her in-laws but, more critically, from deep-seated notions within herself? As the moment stretched, an undercurrent of excitement merged with uncertainty, propelling Jessie into a pivotal chapter of change. With fresh clarity and a heart determined for transformation, she felt an electrifying new chapter begin to unfold. What challenges awaited as she fought to redefine personal and familial narratives within a context that often refused to bend? The path seemed laden with complexities, but that was part of her journey, and she was ready to embrace the unknown. As the evening continued, Jessie felt a shift in her energy, a blend of vulnerability and strength that pulsed through her. The dinner table, once a stage for display, became a platform of introspection. The walls she'd spent years building around her identity felt thinner, almost translucent. Mark's question resonated in her mind. How do I apply my experiences practically? She echoed inwardly, her thoughts tumbling into uncharted territory. She envisioned her children's faces innocent yet burdened with the unyielding expectations of societal norms. They were only kids, yet she sensed the looming pressure already beginning to mold their perceptions of success. Feeling a wave of determination rising within her, Jessie contemplated the dinner rituals they shared, the laughter, the love, and the occasional tension laden with unspoken truths. She wondered how to incorporate her evolving understanding into those everyday moments. Her gut instinct warned her it wouldn't be easy. Old habits die hard, especially in a family steeped in tradition and high expectations. Would they recognize the value of emotional honesty? Would they welcome a shift from superficial conversations about status to deeper exploration of feelings? The conflicting thoughts churned in her mind, but she was resolute that in that moment, Jessie decided that a simple practice could serve as her launchpad. Family meetings. Structured gatherings focused not on logistics or finances but on emotions, their triumphs, fears, and learnings. She imagined asking her children about their feelings when they faced setbacks. Would they articulate their fears or mask them behind smiles? The thought invigorated her, igniting a vision where vulnerability was not only accepted but encouraged. Staring out the window while the others continued the conversation, a tantalizing idea formed. What if I shared a failure of the week? A moment where things didn't go according to plan? She could recount how she felt during those struggles, allowing them to see failure as a part of life, a stepping stone rather than a dead end. Yet as the thought coalesced, she felt a cold sweat break out upon considering potential pushback. Her in-laws had always valued external accomplishments. Would they dismiss these practices as trivial? Jessie imagined the matriarch's arched eyebrow or Mark's skeptical gaze again. What if her earnest attempts to redefine success were dismissed as naive idealism? The fear tugged at her resolve, but the thought of protecting her children from becoming trophies for others to judge only deepened her conviction. Jessie was done conforming. With renewed focus, she diverted her gaze back to the table. Each family member had their own complexity stories waiting to be unearthed. Perhaps sharing her own failure of the week might inspire them to do the same. I've been thinking of ways I can better connect with all of you, Jessie ventured, her voice calm but firm, drawing the attention of the table. What do you all think about having regular family discussions where we tackle our highs and lows? Like a share circle where we talk about our week's successes and setbacks? Mark looked intrigued, while the matriarch raised her brow. Jessie felt a rush of adrenaline as she recognized the critical juncture she had crossed. This was the plunge she needed, but was she ready for the depths? Just then, she noticed the matriarch's eyes narrow slightly, a glimmer of reluctance flickering across her features. Isn't that a bit personal? The matriarch questioned, the challenge hanging in the air like a weight. Jessie's heart raced, and now she faced a choice: retreat into familiar ground or stand firm in her mission to reshape the dialogue of her family. The personal is what connects us, Jessie articulated slowly, letting her voice carry the weight of her conviction. Growth comes from honesty, and I believe we owe it to ourselves to embrace that. Yet with each word, she felt an echo of uncertainty. How much pushback would she endure before it stifled her intention? Would she be brave enough to balance the feedback, integrate it into her approach, or find herself entangled in old narratives? Each question spawned doubts, invisible critics voicing their skepticism in her mind. But as Jessie surveyed the expressions around her, she also recognized something anew: the potential for transformation. As the tension thickened, she felt the undeniable thrill of confronting the challenges ahead. The doubt loomed larger, yet they felt balanced by something unyielding within her. With an internal breath of fresh air, she fell into purpose, ready to rise against the tide, yet as the evening waned and discussions wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of her commitment to change was just beginning. What would it take to see her ideas through their resistance? And more importantly, could she balance her own needs for validation with the genuine goal of creating intimacy within her family? Jessie knew the real challenge lay ahead, waiting to be faced head-on. The following week felt fraught with uncertainty as Jessie prepared for the inaugural family meeting. Her mind reeled with possibilities, envisioning the varying reactions she might encounter. She couldn't erase the image of the matriarch's disapproving gaze. That single moment lingered like a phantom, haunting her resolve. On the surface, it was just another Sunday, but for Jessie, it felt different, more charged. She set the dining table with mismatched plates they had accumulated over the years. Each plate held a story, echoes of the past, laughter, and perhaps misunderstandings. As she carefully arranged them, she realized the symbolism they entailed: diversity in dishware representing the multiple facets of her family, but inwardly, she was wrestling with the fear of failure. What if her aspirations for openness crumbled beneath their skeptical scrutiny? She had to remind herself why she was doing this: to cultivate a space where truth could flourish, where vulnerability was welcomed rather than shunned. As the hour approached, Jessie's stomach tightened into a knot. She glanced at her reflection in the hallway mirror, inspecting her expression for any trace of the uncertainty she felt. In its stead was a flicker of determination, a quiet strength igniting the depths of her being. Her children bounded into view, effervescent and blissfully ignorant of the looming gravity of the evening. Jessie felt a swell of affection as naturally as she would a protective shield. She wanted to create something real for them, an emotional sanctuary where their thoughts could breathe uninterrupted. It was a heavy weight she was willing to bear if it meant leaving them with more than just the laurels of accolades and achievements. The family gathered around the table, conversation lulling into silence as Jessie prepared to step into uncharted waters. With each face looking back at her, Mark's curiosity sparking beneath the surface, her children's innocence shining, and the matriarch's critical edge slicing through the warmth, she felt her own heart race. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady but enriched with an undercurrent of vulnerability. "I've been thinking a lot about how we can be more connected as a family. I propose we share our successes and setbacks each week to create more understanding." Uncertainty clouded the room. The matriarch exchanged quick glances with Mark, and Jessie felt the air thicken with unvoiced judgments. It reminded her of the tight knot she often felt in social situations, a blend of anticipation and anxiety. Would the matriarch encourage an open atmosphere, or would her traditionalist views extinguish this flicker of vulnerability? Isn't it a little unconventional? The matriarch interjected, her voice smooth yet unwavering. Jessie knew this would be the moment that defined her trajectory in trying to reshape family dynamics. "Change is uncomfortable," Jessie responded, her heartbeat hammering in her chest. "But I believe that sharing our true selves can help us grow together." "What if everything goes wrong?" Mark chimed in, his concern genuine. "What if those setbacks become arguments?" His question struck deep, and for a moment, Jessie wrestled with doubt flooding her thoughts. Would her ideals shatter against their fears? "Maybe we could approach it with specific topics to guide our conversation," Jessie offered, excitement falling through the cracks of her anxiety. "Safer subjects might ease us into it. For instance, my failure of the week was, well, I forgot to plan a family outing like I said I would because I got caught up with work. I felt bad and like I let you all down." A heavy silence enveloped them. Small shakes of heads and puzzled looks passed around the table like unspoken phenomena. Would sharing this tiny failure create a storm of dissent, or would it pave the way for understanding? The matriarch controlled her tone, yet the challenge remained. "It's quite personal, Jessie, don't you think?" Jessie inhaled deeply, unwilling to retreat. "Experiences like mine are what we all face. If we can show that it's okay to be imperfect, then our children can grow up understanding the beauty in vulnerability." But just as anticipation peaked, Jessie felt the tremors of doubt grip her heart again. Was this really the turning point she hoped for, or merely the starting line of a pushback she wasn't ready to navigate? Suspense hung heavy in the air, she sensed that this conversation could spiral either into intimacy or fracture. Suddenly, her son broke the silence, his voice steady. "Can I go first?" Jessie's breath caught. Who knew what revelations were brewing in his heart? But deep down, Jessie realized the gamble had shifted. If they were truly to embrace this journey together, they needed to tread carefully through the uncharted waters. Her son was ready. Would she be? Inside, Jessie's resolve ignited once more as she wondered whether she could transform personal fears into collective understanding. Would this be their path toward change, or would it unravel into suffocating silence? Her heart raced, for the answer felt tantalizingly close, yet ominously distant. Mark's voice reverberated in the charged atmosphere, a beacon amidst the uncertainty. "Can I go first?" His boldness surprised Jessie, filling her with cautious optimism. Would this ignite the dialogue they desperately needed? As her son began to speak, she braced herself, realizing that this was not just an experiment, but a pivotal moment in defining their family's culture. "I've been struggling at school," he started, looking down at the table. "I failed my math test last week. I thought I understood everything, but when I saw it, I just froze." The honesty in his admission radiated vulnerability. Jessie felt a warmth unfurl in her chest. This was the clarity she yearned for. The act of sharing could bridge the emotional landscape they had navigated for so long. Mark's words set off a ripple of recognition at the table. If he could unearth his own vulnerabilities, perhaps others would follow suit. Jessie caught the matriarch's surprised expression, a flicker of grudging admiration hidden beneath the layers of her traditional demeanor. "Hey, Mark," Jessie said, infusing her voice with warmth. "Thank you for sharing that. It's important to remind ourselves that failure is a part of growth. I think a lot of people can relate." The positive reinforcement was instinctual, and as she spoke, she felt her own fears dissipating into the background. Encouraged by his brother's courage, Jessie's younger daughter chimed in next. "I didn't tell my friends that I wanted to try out for the soccer team because I was scared they'd make fun of me if I didn't make it." The sense of fear she shared mirrored Jessie's own internal struggles. Uncertainty had long been a guest in their home. Jessie interjected swiftly, eager to frame her daughter's honesty in a positive light. "Wanting to follow your passions is commendable, no matter the outcome. You deserve to embrace what you love." Each sharing was like a thread weaving their personal stories into a larger tapestry of familial understanding. As the conversation surged, Jessie could feel tension beginning to dissolve. The at times suffocating silence transformed into a symphony of vulnerabilities. The matriarch shifted in her chair, the preconceived notions waning, and Jessie felt an opportunity blooming. This was no longer just Jessie's initiative. They were beginning to be a collective. As the discussions flowed, Jessie noted how her family began to shed the shackles of expectation. The discourse revealed layers of unmet needs and aspirations. The softening of the matriarch's lens toward the gathering was palpable, even if her words remained cautious. "It's brave of all of you to share," she finally admitted, a hint of pride lacing her tone. Although Jessie's heart soared with progress, unease tugged at her thoughts. Would this newfound openness persist, or were they merely riding the wave of novelty? If they embraced vulnerability today, could they maintain this standard of honesty moving forward? Jessie felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. She realized she had to introduce regularity to this vulnerability. She needed to cultivate a rhythmic practice of sharing that wouldn't ebb away after a single night's worth of dialogue. "Why don't we make this a tradition?" she proposed, her voice steady now. "A set time each week where we come together and share our highs and lows?" Mark and the children exchanged glances. Jessie observed how their expressions shifted toward contemplation. Her heart leaped as the matriarch nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I think that might be beneficial," she conceded, her expression contemplative. Jessie's inner shift was immediate. The doubt in her mind began to morph into the thread of purpose intertwining with her family's amidst the leaps they were taking together. She felt a fire ignite within her spirit as the vision of their newfound openness took shape, yet the irony of her own fragility was not lost on her. Was she ready to dismantle the walls of her own insecurities in the pursuit of fostering this newfound intimacy? A flicker of dread washed over her. What strongholds lay beneath her own guarded heart? Would her desire for openness contract under the pressure? The road ahead remained murky, but clarity was creeping in slowly. As the meeting concluded and conversations lightened around the table, Jessie made a choice. She would not merely guide the conversation, but also lay bare her own struggles week after week, maintaining the vulnerability she hoped to cultivate. Yet, the question remained looming at the fringes of her consciousness: would she possess the courage to dismantle her own barriers, or would she falter when the spotlight shifted toward her? With her heart racing, Jessie sensed their journey together was just beginning, a navigation into deeper vulnerability that would demand even more courage than tonight had necessitated. She steadied herself, for this was no simply reflection, it was a foreboding yet necessary dive into the unknown, one that could either solidify or shatter the foundation they were desperately trying to establish. The stakes had never felt higher, and as Jessie wrestled with her decision, she was struck by the realization that perhaps it was within these very walls of doubt that the most profound revelations waited to be unearthed. The next chapter beckoned, and it held yet another devastatingly personal truth hidden behind a cloud of doubt. Would she rise to the occasion, or retreat into the shadows of her own fears once more? The week crawled by with a mix of anticipation and dread. Jessie found herself nearly breathless each day as the moment approached when she would have to open the vault housing her vulnerabilities. One evening, she sat in the quiet of her room, the light from her desk lamp casting long shadows, shifting her focus inward. A blank notebook lay before her, stark and unyielding, much like her own resolve. Should she write about her fears? Her missteps? The idea filled her with both excitement and terror. What if by sharing her struggles, she exposed herself to judgment? Her mind raced. Could she handle the rawness of her own truths spilling out in front of the family? Her self-doubt loomed large like a dark cloud, whispering insidious things. What if her children saw her weaknesses? What if they thought she hadn't managed her own life well enough to offer guidance? But alongside that fear blossomed an unquenchable desire for authenticity. She had begun this journey to cultivate an environment where honesty thrived, and she could not falter now, not when her family was already unraveling the sturdy threads of vulnerability they had woven. As the designated evening approached, Jessie reminded herself of the gravity of her commitment. This wasn't merely a task of sharing, it was a chance to embody the change she wished to see. She paced her small living room, rehearsing the words she might say, laying bare her struggles with perfectionism, with comparisons to others, and her quest for balance that felt perpetually out of reach. The clock ticked loudly, punctuating her moment of reflection. Her heart thrummed as she prepared to face her family. She felt the weight of expectation balance precariously on her shoulders. When everyone gathered around the table, a palpable silence hung in the air, heavy yet charged with potential. Mark went first again, and as he recounted another school challenge, Jessie noted how he spoke with a newfound confidence. His previous vulnerability sparkled in the light of his developing self-awareness. Their younger daughter followed, sharing a humorous incident from school that belied her fears. It felt as if each person was contributing a piece of a collective puzzle, seeking clarity amidst the chaos. Finally, it was her turn. The warmth of the family tableau glowed against the chill of her trepidation. She cleared her throat, conscious of their eyes upon her. For a fleeting moment, she almost retreated into the safety of silence, but she breathed deeply, summoning the courage embedded in her resolve. "I struggle too," she began, vulnerable words spilling out like imperfect notes of a personal symphony. "Sometimes, I feel overwhelmed, as if I'm navigating a maze without a map. The need to perform, to meet expectations, often feels heavier than I can bear." The room stilled in the gravity of shared silence, absorbing her honesty. She pressed on, revealing her anxiety over familial expectations and the weight of self-imposed standards. With each word, her walls began to crumble, and a sense of liberation washed over her, an exhilarating rush of releasing the burdens she had carried for too long. As she spoke, something shifted among them. The matriarch's expression softened further, eyes glistening as if a barrier had broken. Jessie could sense the transformation, the way her family gathered not just as individuals but as a unit, their connections deepening as they waded into shared vulnerability. "Thank you for that, Mom," Mark's voice broke through the silence, resonating with a mixture of admiration and understanding. "It helps to know we're all in this together." The warmth of his words washed over Jessie, intertwining hope with the acknowledgement that she was not alone in this journey. This was not just an evolution for her children, but an awakening for herself, a recognition that vulnerability was not a weakness, but rather the brave act of showing up as one's authentic self, yet still, an uncertainty lingered, a whispering fear nagging at the edges of her satisfaction. This moment felt beautiful, but could it sustain itself? Would her family remain open to exploring these depths, or would they retreat once the initial novelty faded? And then, a curious thought crept into the forefront of her mind now that she had tasted the sweetness of vulnerability. How far was she willing to go? What other hidden truths lay buried within her, waiting to surface? Tonight's revelations had opened a doorway, but what remained behind it? As she stared into the faces of her family, anticipation knotted in her stomach for what they might uncover next. They had ventured down this path together, but Jessie understood the road ahead would demand even more courage, more honesty, and possibly the confrontation with demons long kept at bay. The weight of those unspooled truths hung in the air like the promise of a storm, invisible yet palpable. Suddenly, it hit her: they were only beginning this journey of discovery. What lay ahead could either illuminate their shared path or shatter the fragile camaraderie they had begun to build. The thunder of realization echoed within her. The next chapter awaited, and it brimmed with uncertainty. Would she ultimately find the strength to confront the shadows that lingered ahead, or would she falter as she uncovered the deeper secrets that now beckoned her? Jessie's resolve hardened as the days passed after that evening of revelations. Each morning greeted her with the soft glow of sunlight, yet the clarity of her recent vulnerability hung heavily in the air, a constant reminder of how she had laid bare pieces of herself. It stoked an uneasiness within her, forcing her to confront uncharted territories of honesty she had long neglected. As she brewed her coffee, Jessie could hear the chatter of her children in the next room, their voices laced with excitement. They seemed more connected, more engaged, yet she felt the push and pull of an impending confrontation with her own truths. The act of opening up had fostered a sense of community within her family, but she was acutely aware that deeper, darker truths lurked in the recesses of her mind, a tangled web of unaddressed fears and regrets. One cloudy afternoon, as she sat at her kitchen table with her notebook, she recognized the silence wasn't just a peaceful absence of noise. It was filled with unasked questions and unresolved conflicts. What other burdens had she carried that weighed her down? Her fingers danced over the pages of the notebook, yearning to document her reflections but hesitant about the repercussions of fully diving into the depths of her psyche. The next family meeting loomed. The chance she had craved for deeper discussions loomed larger than ever. As she organized snacks in the kitchen, her mind drifted to the ways she might navigate the next conversation. What vital truths would emerge? How much of herself was she truly prepared to expose? Her daughter, Sarah, bounded into the kitchen, a grocery list clutched in her hand. "Mom, we should definitely get cookies for tonight. What do you think?" Jessie smiled, momentarily distracted by her daughter's exuberance. "Sure, sweetheart. That sounds great. Do you think everyone will be as open as last time?" Sarah's eyes sparkled with hope. Jessie's heart sank at the reminder of the evening's emotional exposure. "I hope so," she said cautiously. "But we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable." As the afternoon wore on, Jessie sat with her notebook again, her resolve morphing into determination. She recognized that her vulnerability had not only strengthened her family's bonds but had illuminated her inner narrative, an unwritten story of all the missed opportunities she had yet to confront. Suddenly, a memory surfaced: the last time she had met a substantial challenge alone, squirming beneath expectations both imposed by herself and others. It had been years since she had faced the criticisms and observations of her own family, haunted by their perception of her failures. Perhaps this was also time to confront those shadows live, in the presence of her loved ones. As the evening approached, Jessie felt an unusual blend of excitement and apprehension. She gathered her courage, recalling her intention to lead them into a space that invited deeper discussions. If she was vulnerable, perhaps they would be willing to follow her into their own hidden depths. The clock ticked slowly, amplifying a heartbeat that seemed to pulse with anticipation and dread. Tonight was the night for deeper truths to be unearthed. As her family gathered around the table again, she sensed the intensity building in the room. Anticipation crackled like static in the air. Jessie took a deep breath, deciding it was time to relinquish her fear and embrace the unknown, ready to face the unseen struggle that had lingered and kept her anchored. "I know I haven't shared everything," she began slowly, her gaze shifting among her family members. There's still so much about my past that colors my present, a past where I didn't always succeed, where I faltered, and where I felt the need to hide. But perhaps we're all dealing with things we haven't talked about yet? And with those words, Jessie acknowledged that each heartbeat could unveil a new facet of their collective vulnerability. Now, as they stood on the verge of shared truths, would they all find clarity in their confessions, or would the shadows of the past inject hesitation where strength was needed? The air shifted, charged with possibility, leaving her awash in uncertainty. The time had come to forge ahead, but the question loomed: could this opening lead to a collective healing, or would it expose fractures in their newfound unity? What hidden truths awaited them, ready to emerge like unwritten chapters of a life story yet untold? As Jessie sat surrounded by her family, she felt a surge of determination wash over her. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone sensed that tonight would unshackle deeper truths and illuminate their shared vulnerabilities. She had put off this moment for too long, allowing trepidation to silence her. No more. This was a pivotal juncture in her journey, a chance to connect and redefine their bonds in the process. Every one of us carries stories that shape who we are today, Jessie began, her voice steady yet imbued with emotion. She scanned the faces at the table, each expression reflecting curiosity, apprehension, or a genuine willingness to delve into the unknown. I want us to speak openly about our struggles, the times when we felt less than perfect. For me, it has always been the fear of inadequacy that loomed large, stemming from moments that left me doubting myself, especially in a world that often equates success with material wealth. The room held its breath, and she could feel the weight of those unspoken stories beckoning them forward. I remember a time, many years ago, she continued, her voice unwavering. A moment when I felt utterly lost. I had just graduated from nursing school, and the expectation to excel was overwhelming. When I failed my first critical exam, it wasn't just a setback, it shattered my confidence. I feared that by not meeting everyone's expectations, would bring shame upon myself and my family. It was a burden I carried silently. As she recounted the memory, Jessie felt a tremendous release, the weight of her long-held fears uncoiling as she laid them bare. The moment felt transformative, a departure from guilt to liberation. I know I am not alone in feeling this way, she stated, with conviction. We've all faced moments where we've questioned ourselves, moments that hold us captive in silence. There was a shift around the table. Mark nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. The matriarch glanced at her son, as if seeing him and Jessie in a new light. I realize now that hiding our failures only perpetuates the cycle of fear, Jessie pressed on, her voice filled with a newfound confidence. I refuse to let my children grow up believing that their worth lies solely in achievements. Just as I learned from my struggles, I want each of you to understand that it's our resilience that truly defines us. The silence that enveloped them was punctuated by the sound of her daughter's gentle voice. Mom, thank you for sharing that. I thought you were always confident. It helps to know we can be both strong and scared at the same time. With her daughter's words, Jessie felt the rising tide of connection. She had laid the groundwork for a culture of openness. Encouraged, the matriarch broke her silence. Jessie, I've watched my family pursue success, often at a cost. Perhaps it's time we embrace deeper discussions, those that value emotional depth over appearances. The desire within Jessie surged. This was not just an affirmation but a collective acknowledgement of their shared humanity. They were embarking on a new journey, collectively embracing their imperfections and fears. Mark leaned further into the discussion. Mom, if we did share our failures, we might learn to lean on each other rather than stand alone in our struggles. The quiet wisdom and understanding in his voice were palpable. Encouraged by their words, Jessie proposed, how about we hold a weekly meeting where we not only share our achievements but also reflect on our challenges? Creating a safe space that welcomes vulnerability could foster the kind of understanding we need. The room burst into conversation as family members piped up, expressing their eagerness to commit to this new practice, merging their lives into a way of honesty and growth. The barriers that had once defined them, the traditional expectations, the assumptions about each other's successes, began to erode as Jessie witnessed their eagerness to embrace a new foundation based on mutual understanding. As laughter and earnest reflections filled the dining room, Jessie's heart swelled with a sense of fulfillment previously thought unattainable. She had conquered the monsters of her past, stepping into her truth with newfound confidence. The realization changed her perception of success. It wasn't merely the absence of failures but rather an honest exploration of life's complexities with the people she loved most. This night marked a profound transformation not only for Jessie but for the entire family. With each shared story, they forged deeper connections. Barriers began to fade, unveiling something beautiful, an authentic bond built on love, strength, and the understanding that they were all imperfect beings navigating the intricate tapestry of life. Jessie felt an immense sense of accomplishment swell within her. She embraced her story and hers alone as a vessel for growth. As laughter mingled with the stories shared, she knew she had achieved more than simply revealing her past. She had instilled a legacy of resilience her children could carry forward into their own lives. In that moment, she experienced a profound truth. True wealth lies in vulnerability, the courage to confront one's fears and the compassion to share that journey with others. She had stepped onto the path of authentic connection, and there was no turning back. This was the moment she needed, the bridge she had hoped to build, where every member of the family felt seen and valued for who they truly were, not just for their accomplishments, but for their courage to be authentic. As the evening drew to a close, Jessie could finally breathe deeply. The weight she had carried for so long lifted, replaced with the sweet echoes of understanding and acceptance. She had transformed from a woman burdened by the weight of expectation to the architect of a loving, open family culture. Tonight, she didn't just attend a dinner. She reclaimed her story and united her family in a bond that promised to evolve together. Now it was time for you to step into your own transformative journey. Don't miss the chance to connect with more inspiring stories. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional narratives. Leave a like now to prop up the algorithm and keep these heartwarming tales alive. Comment your personal reflections and insights about Jessie's journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of vulnerability and connection. Step forward, because true fans of stories of personal growth recognize the importance of supporting the channel through their active engagement.